Secretary of State John Kerry says he's spoken with his Russian counterpart about the DNC email breach, but has not accused Russia of hacking into the Democratic Party's computers. Hillary Clinton's campaign suggests Russia might have done just that to benefit Donald Trump's campaign. Trump denies the accusations, and Russia says U.S. leaders are simply being paranoid. Let's bring in Christopher Swift, adjunct professor of national security studies at Georgetown University. Does this, in your experience, does this DNC hack have the hallmarks of Russian meddling?
Well, I think it certainly does, and we have three good foundations to make that claim. The first is the FBI has indicated that the DNC and other campaigns in the United States have in fact been targeted by Russian intelligence in the past. Second, we have independent cybersecurity experts that have confirmed that Russian intelligence or individuals associated with Russian intelligence were involved in the DNC hack. And third, we have the use of WikiLeaks, which has long been an instrument that served Russian messaging or messaging that's aligned with the interests of the Russian government. If the Russian government wasn't directly involved here, I think it's safe to say that they were indirectly involved, and they're certainly profiting from the outcome.
We'll get to WikiLeaks in just a moment. I suppose that there are many in the Republican Party, maybe some independents, who are sort of snickering that the Democrats had, so many of their faults exposed by what happened here. But bigger picture, if the Russian government is meddling or hacking into a major American political party, is that a concern for all of us?
Oh, absolutely. And what makes it even more concerning, John, is the extent to which this kind of directed information operation has been occurring, not just in the United States, but also in the United Kingdom with the Brexit vote, in places like Hungary and Austria, with some of the far-right and far-left parties there. Look, part of the Kremlin strategy in recent years has been to empower and embolden these far-right and far-left extremist parties across the NATO zone in the hope of getting these populist movements into power and undermining support for some of the alliances that were built up after the Second World War. Part of the reason why you see the sort of directed attacks against the DNC and the Clinton campaign in particular is because they've been strong proponents of NATO. It wouldn't surprise me if Republican candidates that were equally strong proponents of NATO would be subject to similar types of attacks in the future.
So you think the Russians are trying to basically destabilize the fabric of America by empowering...
Yeah, I wouldn't say the fabric of America, John. What I would say is the Russian government has a great interest in people taking our alliances much less seriously than we have in the past, be they political alliances like the European Union, be they military alliances like NATO, be they free trade arrangements, whatever it is, that post-World War II international system that our parents and grandparents built that gave us so much stability and prosperity is not something that inures well to Vladimir Putin's interests. The more instability there is in that zone of democracy and prosperity, the more leverage Russia gets. So anything they can do at a low cost on the margins with these extremist left-wing and right-wing parties, they're going to try to do. They've said as much, they've directed as much, and if you look at Russian media and Russian messaging over the last 5 years, these kinds of directed attacks against U.S. political parties, whether the Democrats or the Republicans, should not surprise us in the least.
What about WikiLeaks? It bills itself as just sort of an information clearinghouse that is nonpartisan, open to anybody, but you suggest in something you said earlier, that WikiLeaks is something of a puppet of the Russian government?
John, I work with a lot of investigative journalists on the left and on the right who are trying to speak truth to power and figure out what's going on in the world. And their journalistic integrity sometimes, is called into question because of the political opinions that they might have. But there is a big difference between a journalistic organization that is about informing an audience and giving people the tools they need to understand what matters in their lives, and an organization like WikiLeaks that releases information on a schedule determined by others, that takes funding indirectly from foreign governments, and that determines what part of the entire story you're going to see. Those are information operations. It's directed propaganda. It's not journalism. And one of the things we need to do in the West is really draw a strong distinction between the stuff that's protected by the First Amendment and press freedoms, the ability to have an open conversation about the facts, and the distorted facts or the managed facts or the messages that we get from certain media organizations that hide under the cover of the First Amendment but are actually working on behalf of our adversaries overseas.
Christopher Swift, Georgetown University. Thank you, sir.